What is going on, YouTube? It is the Dual Threat Podcast here, your daily news source for all things sports. My name is Drew, and this is my co-host.
I'm Jacob. How is everybody's day going?
Let's go, everybody. We're going to get straight into our over-under reactions. We'll explain what that is in a little bit, but first, make sure you subscribe, and more importantly, make sure to comment, but let's not be rude, Let's just say our opinions around here. No need to call people names. All right, let's get straight into it. So, Jacob, why don't you explain what's going on in this segment?
All right, everybody. Over, under reaction. What does it mean? What does it all mean? I don't know. I'm here to tell you, okay? Overreaction is something that the AP poll, ESPN, Kirk Herbstreit are reacting to a lot, okay? Doesn't have to be good or bad. Just the media is giving it a lot of attention. Underreaction is obviously the opposite. The media is not giving them attention. So us, as part of the media, are here to give them the attention they deserve.
Amen, brother. Let's get straight into it. For me, I'm going to start with my overreaction. And I believe that Clemson, with their close win over Florida State, is maybe there's a lot of box score watchers out there. And trust me, I understand with this past weekend, there was a lot of games. It was loaded. This was at the same time as Alabama, Tennessee, like towards the end of the game. And then it was also towards the end of the game as Utah, USC as well. And so you might not have been, tuning into this game to get the final score or watch it throughout the game. But let me tell you something. Like, this game was dominant. I mean, I believe at one point it was 34-14. And then it was very clear at halftime or towards the end of the third quarter that Clemson really took the pedal off the gas and just let Florida State get a couple of plays in. And so you see that Florida State has a 6-point loss to Clemson, but really it was a way more dominant performance than that. They scored 14 points in trash time. And so I think we really need to give Clemson a lot more credit than what they got for this win. Florida State, they looked like a really solid team early on. They've had a lot of losses as of recent. And so maybe this win later on won't look as good. But I'm here to tell you right now that this was a dominant win. And so I think what we can do is put a lot of faith that Clemson is a great team. They're obviously the favorite to win the ACC. They're playing in their undefeated matchup against Syracuse this weekend. They are a 2-touchdown favorite. That's how good Clemson is seeming to be right now. And so you may look at this line, and that I feel like that's kind of a trap line for Vegas. People are looking at the box score of this game and seeing how close this was, seeing how Syracuse is a dominant team over NC State, who didn't have their quarterback last weekend. And so I think a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money on that game because they're going to be very confident that Clemson's not as good as they were when they just look at this box score. So that's me for my overreaction. Jacob, why don't you go ahead and give us yours?
Yeah, I'm gonna get into it like TurboTax. Also, I'm gonna go with the number 7 team in the country, Ole Miss. Okay, so Ole Miss is a very, very weird team this year because they're obviously 7-0. They look good in most of their games, but they haven't played anybody. And if it were any other conference, any other team, this team would be probably, I mean, they'd be cracking the top 10, but they would probably be like UCLA, right? They've had one ranked win, and it was over Kentucky, who had their quarterback get injured and fumble the ball and pretty much hand them the win. Like, I don't know, that game wasn't very convincing, if you ask me, at home as well. And then this past week, they ended up, like you said, scoreboard watchers will tell you they dominated Auburn. But like everybody that was watching that game knows that it was relatively close. I mean, Auburn did kick a field goal on 3rd down, which questionable coaching for sure. But yeah, I think Ole Miss is, I don't know, the number 7, call it SEC bias, call it whatever you want. I just think they're getting a little bit too much hype in the media. I think LSU, Drew, you might talk about them later, but I think that's a trap game this week. I think LSU might actually like kind of beat them around a little bit, but we'll see. But yeah, I think I think they have a really hard schedule coming up. So I could definitely see them finishing the season with 2, maybe even 3 losses with 5 weeks to go.
Yeah, I agree. And so I'm going to flip it to the under for me, and I'm going to talk about what you just said. I'm going to talk about LSU. This team started out with a loss against Florida State with Brian Kelly's first game, and Florida State seemed to be a very good team. And so people were starting to think that, hey, maybe LSU is, they're starting to get better. They beat Mississippi State, which I think is a tremendous win. I think Mississippi State is a lot better than what people give them credit for. And then they barely beat Auburn. At Auburn, Auburn's not a great team this year, and so that mixed with them getting dominated by Tennessee, really, I think, kind of just put LSU out of the SEC West conversation entirely. And then they turned this around as I believe it was a field goal underdog at Florida and beat them by 10. And I think Florida even scored late as well, and so that was really a dominant performance there as well. And so beating Mississippi State and beating Florida at Florida, I think are two major wins that people are not going to talk about nearly enough this year. LSU, like Jacob talked about against Ole Miss. Ole Miss is maybe a little overrated in my opinion, but that line is switching between LSU favored and Ole Miss favored. It started out as a 2.5 point favorite for LSU. It went all the way as to a 1 point swing for, or a 1 point favorite for Ole Miss, and it's actually gone the other way back, and now LSU is favored at this current moment. And so you're telling me that LSU, a team with 2 losses, is is basically a pick'em against a top 10 team coming off of basically a 17-point win against Florida. And as we see now, Tennessee is a very, very good team. And so I think a 30-point loss to Tennessee doesn't look nearly as bad as it did that week. And so you gotta start thinking that maybe LSU is just a little bit underrated here. They have not such a favorable schedule this second half of the season. I will give you that. Playing Ole Miss then they play Alabama, at Arkansas, at Texas A&M. I think realistically they can win 4 of these games. I mean, they could end up 9-2 at the end of this year with just a loss to Alabama for the rest of the season, and so that would make them only 2 losses in SEC conference play against Tennessee and Alabama, probably the 2 best teams in the SEC, maybe Georgia. But I mean, that looks very favorable to me, especially in first year Brian Kelly, and it kind of looks like they're on the come up. And you just may want to watch out for LSU in these next couple of years, because I personally was not a fan of the Brian Kelly hire, but it looks like it may just turn out to be a pretty good hire in the long run. So that's my underreaction. Jacob, why don't you give us another one of yours?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go flip the script from my last one and go Kentucky as my underreaction. Sticking in the SEC, I talked about him a second ago when Ole Miss basically stole that game from them, but Kentucky just comes off a 10-point win against Mississippi State, who, I mean, and they almost could have won by more than that at the very end of the game, but I mean, we're talking about a Kentucky team that was ranked really high at the beginning of the year and then loses to Ole Miss barely at Ole Miss and slides all the way down the rankings, and then their quarterback's out and they lose to South Carolina, who granted is a pretty solid team. I mean, where they don't get enough credit because the SEC is so kind of loaded this year. But I mean, without your starting quarterback, you can't really expect much to happen, especially for a team like Kentucky, where their identity is in the defense and run game. And when you have a really, really good quarterback in Will Levis and he can't play, it's like your defense did their job. South Carolina only scored 24 points, but like him being there is what they needed to put them over the edge in that game. So really, they could be undefeated right now. I mean, if we're just talking about some injury luck and the end of that Ole Miss game, I mean, they could be undefeated right now. Absolutely dominated Mississippi State. I mean, that game was never even close. Mississippi State got that long pick 6 off of they just jumped the screenplay, which is a great play by the DB, but their defense absolutely suffocated Will Rogers, and I think it's really impressive what they've done when they've been at full strength this year. They're 5-2. play Tennessee this weekend, which obviously is not going to be easy to go at Tennessee and win that game. But I think their defense is legit and it's good enough to do it. I mean, they have a better defense than Alabama does. And if they can, the problem is they're going to have to score points. I mean, they haven't been able to score more than mid 30s all season. And so, yeah, maybe they can keep Tennessee in the high 20s, mid 30s, but can you score that much? So I don't know. I do think they're still ranked way too low. 19 after a dominant win like that against Mississippi State, and just how they've played, how they've looked and played all season. They've been great, but they got a big test coming up this week that I think is winnable. I don't think it's going to be easy at Tennessee. It's going to be very, very difficult, but I think that if they do pull that win off, then they should be back in the top 10. No questions asked.
All right, I'm kind of conflicted here as to what I want to do for my final underreaction, but I think I'll stick with this one. I'm going to stay in the SEC, and I'm going to talk about the Alabama-Tennessee game. But every person in America is talking about Hendon Hooker, and well, I will say, I was wrong about him. He was phenomenal. I mean, 21 for 30, 400 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, all to the same person. That's pretty cool. 5 touchdowns on 6 receptions is awesome. 200 yards, that's pretty crazy. But I'm actually going to talk about the losing team, and a lot of people don't really want to talk about them because obviously, Alabama lost. That's all people talk about. I want to talk about Bryce Young and say that he is coming back from an injury, and he played probably the performance of a lifetime is what I saw. I mean, him and Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm not saying that. I am saying it. Alabama would probably be a 4-loss team without Bryce Young this year. I mean, he has shown that not only is he as a Heisman winner last year, he's probably the best quarterback that Alabama has had in their history. And that's saying a lot. I mean, they had Tua, they had just so many great quarterbacks. But the fact that Bryce Young can play as well as he did without the elite wide receivers that he normally would have had, like last year, like Jameson Williams, they're not in this game if he is not the quarterback. He made so many great plays that you wouldn't really see on ESPN because they're not flashy. But if it's any other quarterback back there, it's probably a 10-yard sack or an incomplete pass throwing it away. It's just the plays that he makes are crazy, and nobody's going to talk about that because obviously they lost the game. But I'm telling you right now that the fact that Bryce Young scored 49 points, obviously he had some help with Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, he had 3 touchdowns. But the fact that they scored 49 points against Tennessee, who doesn't have the best defense, but with those receivers that they have, says a lot about Bryce Young to me, especially coming off an injury. He didn't even play the week before that. And so you got to give him credit. He looked phenomenal, and obviously they lost, but you can't put that on Bryce Young. He put them in position to win that game. They had a minute left. He drove them down the field, got them in field goal positioning. You got to make that field goal. You can't put this game on Bryce Young. He did enough to win the game. Obviously, so did Hendon Hooker. So you can't put them on either quarterbacks. But I think to penalize Bryce Young and his Heisman odds because of this game is kind of ridiculous. To me, both of these quarterbacks look like Heisman performances. And I think everybody's talking about Hendon Hooker. I wanted to talk about Bryce Young because he looked great. And that's what I wanted to say about that game. Congratulations to Hendon Hooker. I was wrong. I will say that. Maybe if you search your own podcast on YouTube and you happen to find this one, I'm sorry. You did great. Congratulations on the win, and y'all deserved to take the field goal post away. But I'm not a fan of Tennessee's athletic department asking for a handout because of it. It's kind of ridiculous. But all right, Jacob, go ahead with yours.
All right, I'm going to round this out with another overreaction by the AP poll, and the AP poll less so much, but just kind of the vibe I've been getting about the Big 12. The TCU basically gets absolutely handed the game by Oklahoma State. Absolute lucky comeback, make up 14 points in the fourth quarter to force overtime and then win in overtime. I don't think this win was anything crazy special. I mean, Spencer Sanders looked amazing in the first half and then pretty much just decided to stay in the locker room at halftime. And Oklahoma State just I don't know, couldn't close. I don't know. I think it's hard to judge because um Oklahoma State was ranked pretty high. And so, like I said, the AP poll, you kind of have to put TCU at number 8. But I think 2 weeks ago, they beat Kansas without their starting quarterback. And then this week, they were getting dominated the entire game and had a crazy comeback. But does that mean you're good or does that mean you're I guess we'll wait and see. TCU coming up pretty soon, Kansas State, Texas in a few weeks. They got some tests and we'll see eventually. But in terms of where they're ranked now, 8, I think is too high just purely because the last 2 weeks that have been counted as their good wins haven't even really. I mean, it wasn't a full strength Kansas, and they, yeah, like I've been saying, kind of got gifted the Oklahoma State game. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe the Horned Frogs will prove me wrong, but I kind of think they're being talked about a little bit too much. Like, I think UCLA should definitely be ahead of them, especially with what's been happening in Pac-12. They have an easier path to the playoff, in my opinion, no doubt. So we'll see. But yeah, that's I think we just need to calm down on TCU a little bit because they could lose this weekend and then be knocked right out. So.
All right, well, that's all from me. I actually just want to say one quick thing. This is the one I was kind of thinking about doing. I think South Carolina is a very underrated team this year. They have the best defensive line in the country, and just watch them against Texas A&M this week. That may be a pretty tough game this weekend. So that is all from me. Jacob, do you have anything else you wanted to say besides, just the usual?
No, I think that's it. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Everybody has spicy takes sometimes. So if you have a hot take or you think one of our takes was hot, leave it in the comments. But like Drew said earlier, let's be nice. Let's be nice. But yeah, that's pretty much all we got. Drew, you got anything else?
Oh, thank y'all for tuning in. Appreciate it. Peace.